Luther Martin was not what you'd expect from a founding figure. He was loud. He was disheveled. He drank too much. And he spoke with the kind of fiery bluntness that left even his allies uncomfortable. But in the chaos of the Constitutional Convention, as the nation's elite quietly built a powerful federal government, Luther Martin did something few dared to do. He stood up and told them they were wrong. Martin was the Attorney General of Maryland, a staunch defender of states' rights, and a brilliant, if erratic, legal mind. He arrived in Philadelphia in 1787 not to build a new government, but to improve the existing Articles of Confederation. What he saw instead was a secret plan to throw out the old system and centralize power under a new constitution. To Martin, this wasn't reform. It was betrayal. From the very beginning, Martin objected to the secrecy of the convention. The public, he said, had a right to know what was being debated behind closed doors. Transparency, to him, was not just a courtesy, but a fundamental requirement of a free republic. Yet, even as he voiced his concerns, he found himself drowned out by men more interested in unity than dissent, more eager to write history than listen to it. But Martin refused to be silent. He delivered speech after speech warning that the vague language of federal powers would expand over time, creeping into the daily lives of citizens and eroding the independence of the states. He feared that the newly proposed executive branch resembled monarchy more than republicanism, and he was especially alarmed by the absence of any declared protections for individual rights. No mention of free speech, no safeguard for trial by jury, no barrier against unreasonable searches or cruel punishment. And then there was slavery. Martin was among the few delegates who openly condemned it. He was incensed by the 3/5 compromise and by the implicit protections slavery received in the new Constitution. He called it a stain on the moral conscience of the nation and a dangerous hypocrisy that could undermine everything the Revolution had stood for. This was not a man speaking in measured tones or political calculation. Luther Martin thundered. He insulted. He raged. He described the convention not as a gathering of patriots, but as a cabal of power-hungry elites looking to replace British tyranny with their own. To many in that room, Martin was a nuisance, an obstacle, a distraction from the business of nation-building. But to Martin, principle came before legacy. So in November of 1787, after months of argument and resistance, Luther Martin left the convention and returned to Maryland. There, he gave one of the most important and most forgotten speeches in American history. In a 2-day address to the Maryland House of Delegates, Martin exposed what had taken place in Philadelphia. He recounted the secret debates, explained the flaws he saw in the Constitution, and urged his fellow citizens not to ratify it without fundamental changes. It was one of the earliest public critiques of the Constitution, and it laid the groundwork for the Anti-Federalist Movement. Martin's warnings weren't without effect. Thanks to voices like his, the push for a Bill of Rights gained steam. Federalists, once dismissive of such protections, were forced to concede the necessity of enshrining individual liberties to get the Constitution ratified. Though Martin failed to stop the document's adoption, he helped ensure it didn't remain unchecked. But the years that followed were not kind to him. He returned to his role as Maryland's Attorney General, but remained a thorn in the side of federal power. He opposed key Supreme Court rulings that he believed expanded national authority beyond what was originally intended. In one of his most controversial acts, he defended Aaron Burr against charges of treason, insisting that due process applied to all men, even the most hated. He also took part in McCulloch v. Maryland, one of the most consequential constitutional cases in U.S. history. Though the Supreme Court ruled against Maryland, establishing federal supremacy over state law, Martin's arguments echoed with concern that the new national government was growing bolder, broader, and increasingly unmoored from the compact the states had agreed to. Martin's legal legacy was defined not by victories, but by resistance. He became a symbol of pushback in an age of rapid consolidation. Where others sought efficiency through centralization, Martin saw danger, a road that would lead, eventually, to the erosion of liberty in the name of national interest. By the early 1800s, Martin's fortunes had waned. His health declined. His finances crumbled. He was forced to rely on the charity of others, including his old nemesis John Marshall. His mind, once razor-sharp, grew clouded by illness and alcohol. He died in relative obscurity in 1826, the same year as Jefferson and Adams, though with none of their fanfare. Today, Luther Martin is little more than a footnote in American history textbooks. His name is missing from the Constitution, not because he didn't contribute, but because he refused to sign something he believed was dangerous. He wasn't perfect. He could be abrasive, chaotic, even self-destructive. But he also had something rare among political men, a willingness to lose. Luther Martin chose principle over popularity, conscience over conformity. He dared to ask hard questions when others wanted silence. And he paid the price for it. But his legacy endures. Every time we debate the limits of federal power, every time we defend the Bill of Rights, every time someone questions whether we've drifted from the ideals of the Revolution, we echo the voice of Luther Martin. He was a prophet of dissent, a champion of liberty, and a man who understood that freedom is not maintained by agreement, but by resistance. In an age of polished founding fathers, Martin was rough and unvarnished. But maybe that's what made him dangerous. Because the truth, spoken without apology, always is. His story reminds us that the health of a republic does not depend on unity alone, but on the tolerance of dissent, especially when it's uncomfortable. It takes courage to challenge a rising consensus. And it takes clarity to see when liberty is being traded for order. Luther Martin may have walked out of the convention, but he walked straight into the tradition of American resistance, a tradition that must be preserved if the republic is to endure.